Vera had already reached the door when she heard the voice behind her. "Leaving already?" Her hand froze on the handle. For a second, she considered pretending she hadn't heard him. It would have been easier. Easier than turning around. Easier than explaining why her chest felt tight in a room full of smiling people. Slowly, she looked back. A tall man stood a few feet away, dressed like he belonged in the expensive world she had been trying to survive for the past 2 hours. He wasn't laughing. He wasn't smirking. He wasn't looking at her with pity. He simply looked curious. Vera forced a smile. "I think I've enjoyed enough air conditioning for one night." The man chuckled softly. It was the first genuine laugh she had heard all evening. Around them, music floated through the room while groups of guests continued talking near the bar and dining area. Nobody seemed to notice what was happening at the entrance, which was exactly how Vera preferred it, because if she stayed 1 minute longer, she was afraid everyone would see the embarrassment she had spent the entire evening trying to hide. The stranger glanced toward the crowd, then back at her. "That bad?" Vera crossed her arms. "You want the honest answer?" "Always." She nodded toward the room. "Everybody in there already has a group, a story, a place. I'm just the woman standing near the food pretending she's checking her phone." The man studied her for a moment, not judging, listening. That surprised her. Most people listened only long enough to prepare their next sentence. This man actually seemed interested. Before he could respond, Vera shook her head. "Sorry, forget I said that." "Why?" "Because this is supposed to be a nice party." "Maybe." His answer caught her off guard. "Maybe? Not definitely, not of course. Maybe." The stranger slipped one hand into his pocket. "You know something funny?" "What?" "I've been here all evening, too." Vera raised an eyebrow. And I haven't enjoyed most of it." That earned the smallest smile from her. "You expect me to believe that? Why not?" She looked around at the luxury surrounding them. The expensive decorations, the polished floors, the guests dressed like magazine covers. Then she looked back at him. "Because people like you usually own places like this." His grin widened. "That's not always as fun as it sounds." Vera laughed despite herself. A real laugh. The first one she'd allowed all night. For a brief moment, the knot in her stomach loosened. The stranger noticed. "So there it is." "What?" The smile. "Don't get used to it. No promises." For reasons she couldn't explain, Vera found herself smiling again. And that annoyed her, because she had already decided she was leaving. That decision had been made. Final. Done. Yet somehow this conversation was making it harder to walk away. Before we continue, let me take a moment to welcome both our new and returning viewers. Welcome to Love, Money, and Secret, where America's greatest stories and life lessons meet creativity and heart. If you're new to the family, we're grateful to have you here. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It helps us bring more unforgettable stories your way. And if you're enjoying this story already, please take a second to like this video and leave a comment. Those small actions help YouTube share these stories with more people around the world. Also, tell us where you're watching from today. We'd love to know which city, state, or country you're joining us from. Quick prayer. May God bless every person listening today. May your home be filled with peace, your heart with strength, and your mind with hope. Whatever challenge you're facing, may you find the courage to keep moving forward and the wisdom to recognize the good people placed in your path. Amen. Now let's continue. Vera glanced toward the parking lot beyond the glass doors. Freedom was only a few steps away. No more awkward conversations, no more forced smiles, no more pretending she belonged. Yet the stranger still stood there calmly, not blocking her path, not pressuring her, just talking to her like she mattered. Oddly enough, that felt unfamiliar. And somewhere across the room, several guests had started looking in their direction. Vera noticed immediately. The stranger noticed too. Neither of them said a word about it. But something was beginning to change, something neither of them expected when this evening started. And for the first time since arriving at the party, Vera hesitated before leaving. Before Vera reached that door, before Marco's calm voice stopped her, the evening had already done enough damage. She had walked into the private Washington party with one simple hope. Just one peaceful night. Not a night where she had to answer calls about bills. Not a night where she had to rush from work to home, from home to errands, from errands to another responsibility. For once, Vera wanted to feel beautiful without feeling guilty about it. She wanted to laugh. She wanted to hear music. She wanted to remember that beneath the tired mother, the hard-working woman, the careful spender, and the person everyone leaned on, there was still a woman with dreams. But the room reminded her quickly that not every invitation means welcome. At first, nobody said anything openly cruel. That almost made it worse. The judgment came with soft smiles. A woman near the refreshment table looked Vera up and down and said, "Your dress is cute. Very simple." Vera smiled. "Thank you." Simple still has rent money left over. The woman blinked, unsure if she should laugh. Vera did not wait to find out. A few minutes later, another guest leaned toward her and asked, "Are you helping with the serving tonight?" Vera looked down at her purse, then back at the woman. "No, ma'am, I'm helping myself to patients." The woman gave a weak laugh and quickly walked away. Vera kept her face pleasant, but inside, every small comment landed. She stood near the food, pretending to check messages that were not coming in. Across the room, couples leaned into each other. Friends held private conversations. People moved in circles that had no opening for her. She tried once to join a conversation near the window. One woman smiled politely but shifted her body just enough to close the space. That little movement told Vera everything. She stepped back. A waiter passed with a tray of tiny bites. Vera picked one up, looked at it, and whispered, "If this is dinner, I should have stopped for fried rice before coming." That small joke saved her from tears. Because the truth was simple. She was tired. Tired of being strong in rooms where nobody asked if she was okay. Tired of being admired only when she was useful. Tired of people acting like single motherhood was a stain instead of a sacrifice. She looked around one last time. Nobody needed her there. Nobody would miss her. So Vera reached for her purse and turned toward the entrance. Her steps were quiet. Her face stayed calm. But inside she made a promise to herself. Never again would she beg a room to make space for her. That was when Marco noticed. He had been standing near a small group of business associates, hearing words but barely listening. He had attended enough polished gatherings to know the difference between conversation and performance. People laughed too loudly when they wanted access. They praised too quickly when they wanted favor. They looked through anyone they believed had nothing to offer. But Vera was different. She had stood alone, yes. But not weak. She had been embarrassed, yes. But not defeated. She had answered disrespect with humor instead of bitterness. Marco saw her heading toward the door and felt something in him move before he could explain it. He excused himself quietly and followed. He did not call her name. He did not make the room turn. He simply reached the doorway and asked, "Leaving already?" Now, standing face to face with him, Vera gave him a careful look. "Why do you care?" Marco respected the question. "I don't like watching someone leave a room because the people inside failed to see her." Vera's expression changed, but only a little. "That sounds nice." "It's true. Rich men always say things nicely." Marco smiled softly. "And single moms always test people this quickly?" Vera's eyes narrowed, but there was humor in it. "Only when they look expensive." Marco laughed. "Not loud, not fake, real." Vera almost smiled again, but caught herself. He looked back toward the party. "Stay 10 more minutes." "For what?" "For a better ending to a bad evening." Vera shook her head. "I'm not looking for rescue. I didn't offer rescue." "Then what are you offering?" Marco opened the door slightly, giving her the choice to leave. Then he stepped aside. "A chair. A conversation. And if both are terrible, I'll personally walk you back to this door." Vera stared at him. For the first time that night, someone had given her dignity without asking for gratitude. She looked at the room, then at the door, then back at him. 10 minutes, she said. Marco nodded. 10 minutes. Vera lifted one finger. "And if you step on my piece, I'm leaving." Marco smiled. "Fair." She turned back toward the party beside him, not behind him. And as they walked in together, the same room that had ignored Vera suddenly began to watch. Marco walked beside Vera as they returned into the party, careful not to make it look like he was leading her back for display. That mattered to her. She had known men who loved attention more than kindness. Men who would help a woman only if the room could clap for them. But Marco did not announce anything. He simply guided her toward a small table near the window, pulled out a chair, and waited. Vera looked at the chair, then at him. "So, this is the famous chair?" Marco nodded. "The best one I could find on short notice. It better come with real food." He glanced at the tiny plate on the table and winced. "That may be where I fail you." Vera sat down, shaking her head. "I knew it. Rich people decorate hunger and call it fine dining." Marco laughed, the kind of laugh that made two nearby guests turn their heads. Vera noticed and lowered her voice. "Don't laugh too loud. They might charge you extra for joy." Marco sat across from her. "You always talk like this?" "Only when I'm trying not to walk out of a party. That means I arrived at the right time." "Maybe," Vera said. "But your 10 minutes has started." Marco checked his watch. "Then I'll use them wisely." For the first time that night, Vera relaxed her shoulders. The table was away from the crowded center of the room, close enough to feel included but far enough to breathe. Through the window, Washington's evening lights moved softly beyond the glass, but Vera kept her attention on the man in front of her. Marco did not ask the usual questions. He did not ask what she did for a living like he was measuring her value. He did not ask who brought her, as if she needed a sponsor to exist in the room. Instead, he asked, "What was the worst part before you decided to leave?" Vera studied him. "You really want to know?" I asked. She leaned back. "The worst part wasn't what people said. It was how carefully they said it." Marco's face became serious. Vera continued, "A direct insult is easy. You can answer it. But those soft little comments, they leave you wondering if you're being sensitive or if people are just trained to be rude politely." Marco nodded slowly. "That happens a lot in rooms like this." "You sound like you know." "I do." Vera gave him a doubtful look. "You? Lonely in a room like this? More often than people think. Come on, I'm serious." She pointed lightly toward the crowd. "People are watching you like you're the owner of the moon. That doesn't mean they know me." That answer quieted her. Marco looked across the room, where people smiled in polished circles. "Some people don't come to talk. They come to position themselves. They want access, favors, approval, invitations." Vera tilted her head. "That sounds exhausting." "It is." She gave a small smile. "So you hide near the window with women who are trying to escape?" "Only the interesting ones." Vera tried not to smile, but failed. "Careful. I am." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was not awkward. It felt like a pause both of them understood. Vera finally said, "I thought money made rooms easier." Marco looked at her gently. "Sometimes it only makes them louder." That stayed with her, because she understood loudness. Not from wealth, but from responsibility. Bills had a sound, motherhood had a sound, being strong for too long had a sound. Maybe Marco's world was different, but loneliness had the same language everywhere. Across the room, a few guests had begun whispering. One woman who had ignored Vera earlier suddenly looked interested. A man near the bar paused mid-conversation and stared toward their table. Vera noticed the shift immediately. Marco did too. She leaned closer and whispered, "Your people are confused." Marco smiled. "They'll survive. They're wondering why you're sitting with me." "Let them wonder." Vera looked at him, surprised by how calm he was. For the first time that evening, she did not feel like the woman near the door. She felt like someone worth sitting with. Vera felt the eyes before she fully turned her head. It was the same room, the same music, the same soft laughter, but the energy around her had changed. Earlier, people had passed her like she was part of the furniture. Now that Marco was seated across from her, suddenly she had become interesting. That bothered her more than the earlier insults. She looked at Marco and said quietly, "Do you see that?" Marco did not look away from her. "Yes. They didn't see me when I was standing alone. I know, but now they see me because you sat down." Marco's expression softened. "That is their mistake, not your value." Vera looked at him for a few seconds. The answer was good, but she was not ready to trust good answers too quickly. "So let me ask you something directly. Go ahead. Why did you really come after me?" Marco leaned back a little, not offended by the question. "Because you looked like someone who had every reason to leave but still left with dignity." Vera folded her hands on the table. "That sounds practiced." "It isn't." "Then say it plain." Marco smiled faintly. "Plain?" "Yes, no rich man poetry." He laughed softly. "All right. You were the only person in this room who seemed real." Vera blinked. That answer landed differently. Marco continued, "You didn't laugh just because people expected you to. You didn't pretend the food was enough. You didn't chase anyone's attention. You were uncomfortable, but you still carried yourself with respect." Vera lowered her eyes for a moment. She had spent most of the night feeling small, yet he had noticed the part of her she was trying hardest to protect. "My life doesn't give me much time to pretend," she said. Marco heard the weight behind the sentence. "Because of your child?" Vera looked up quickly. He raised a hand slightly. "You mentioned single moms earlier. I didn't mean to pry." She relaxed a little. "Yes, because of my child. I'm a mother before anything else most days." "That must be a lot." "It is," Vera said, "but I don't say that for pity. I love being a mother. I just get tired of people acting like single mothers are walking warnings." Marco's face changed. "Not with pity, with recognition." "I understand that more than you think." Vera gave him a doubtful look. "You're a single mother, too?" Marco laughed. "No, single father." Vera paused. That was the first thing about him that truly surprised her. "You have a child?" "I do." "And you're raising your child alone?" "Yes." The humor faded from Vera's face, replaced by something warmer. Marco continued, "People treat single fathers differently. Some praise me for basic things mothers do every day without applause. Some pity me. Some try to step into my life for the wrong reasons. Some assume money makes me less tired." Vera nodded slowly. But bedtime still comes. Every night, and school mornings still don't care how tired you are. Not even a little, and children will ask for something important right when you finally sit down. Marco pointed at her. Exactly. Vera laughed, and this time she did not try to hide it. The sound surprised both of them. For the first time, their worlds did not feel so far apart. Different houses, different bank accounts, different circles, but the same late-night worry, the same quiet fear of making the wrong choice, the same pressure of being both comfort and strength for a child. Marco looked at her with growing respect. You make it look easy. Vera shook her head. No, I make it look necessary. That answer stayed between them. A slower song began playing from the corner of the room. Couples started drifting toward the open space near the center. Vera noticed and immediately looked away. Marco noticed that too. He stood, not suddenly, not dramatically, just with quiet confidence. Vera raised an eyebrow. Where are you going? He offered his hand. I still owe you a better ending to a bad evening. She stared at his hand. You mean dancing? Yes. Marco, I don't know if that's wise. It's only one dance. With everyone watching? They were already watching. Vera gave him a look. That is not helping your case. Marco smiled. Then I'll make a better one. Dance with me because you want to, not because they're looking. Vera looked at the room, then back at him. Her heart warned her to be careful, but her spirit, tired of shrinking, whispered something different. She placed her hand in his. One dance, she said. And if you step on me, I'm telling everybody. Marco's smile widened. Fair? As they walked toward the music, the room grew quieter around them. And Vera knew this dance was about to change the entire night. The moment Vera placed her hand in Marco's, the party changed. Not loudly, not suddenly, but in the quiet way people shift when they realize they may have misjudged someone. Marco led Vera toward the open space near the music, moving with enough confidence to make her feel safe, but not so much that he made her feel controlled. Vera kept her chin lifted, though her heart beat faster than she wanted to admit. Relax, Marco said quietly. Vera glanced at him. That is easy for you to say. Nobody in this room has been studying your dress like it came with a warning label. Marco's mouth curved. For what it's worth, I think you look beautiful. Vera looked away quickly. Careful. Compliments from rich men come with paperwork. No paperwork, he said. Just honesty. She wanted to dismiss it with another joke, but his voice was too steady for that, so she simply said, Thank you. They began to dance slowly. Vera expected awkwardness. She expected him to perform for the room or guide her like she was part of the evening's entertainment. But Marco did neither. He kept the rhythm easy. He gave her space. He looked at her like the room had faded behind them. That made her more nervous than the staring. Near the refreshment table, a woman who had barely spoken to Vera earlier suddenly smiled in her direction. Another guest lifted a glass as if they were old friends. A man near the bar whispered something, and two people turned to look. Vera saw everything. She leaned closer and murmured, Now they know how to smile. Marco did not turn his head. You noticed too? I noticed before the music started. They ignored you when you were alone, and now they want to act like I came with a recommendation. Marco's expression tightened, but his voice stayed calm. That says more about them than you. Vera gave a soft laugh without joy. Maybe. But it still lands on me. Marco understood that. He did not rush to fix the feeling with a grand speech. He simply adjusted his hand slightly, giving her a steadier hold. You do not have to prove anything here, he said. Vera looked at him. I know. But part of her did not know. Part of her still remembered standing alone, swallowing embarrassment with a smile. Part of her still wanted to show everyone she belonged. Yet another part of her, the stronger part, was tired of asking permission to be treated with respect. The song continued. For a few minutes, she allowed herself to enjoy it. Then the moment broke. As they passed near the edge of the dance area, a quiet voice carried from a small group nearby. Well, that is one way to get noticed. The words were not shouted, but they were clear enough. Vera heard them. Marco heard them too. Vera's fingers tightened slightly against his hand. Leave it, she whispered. Marco stopped moving. The room did not go silent yet, but the people closest to them noticed. Marco turned, not with anger, not with drama, but with a calmness that made the moment sharper. He looked toward the group and said, The only person embarrassing this room tonight is the one who thinks kindness has a dress code. No one answered. The music still played, but the conversations around them dropped into silence. Vera stood beside him, stunned. He had defended her without shouting, without making her look weak, without turning her pain into a performance. Marco looked back at Vera and softened his voice. Would you like to finish the dance? Vera studied him differently now. Earlier, she thought he was only polite. Now she saw something deeper. A man with power who did not need to misuse it. A man who could correct a room without crushing anyone. A man who had noticed her dignity before anyone else did. She took a slow breath. Yes, she said, but this time try not to become famous for defending borrowed confidence. Marco smiled. I'll do my best. They continued dancing. This time Vera did not look toward the door. By the time the song ended, Vera no longer felt like she was simply surviving the evening. She stepped back from Marco with a small smile, still aware of the room but no longer ruled by it. Marco bowed his head slightly. Thank you for the dance. Vera raised an eyebrow. You say that like I awarded you something. You did. What? A second chance to improve your night. Vera looked toward the refreshment table and shook her head. The food still failed, but the dance helped. I'll accept that review. They walked back toward the small table near the window, but the party no longer treated Vera like empty space. People who had refused to open conversations now nodded at her. A woman gave a bright smile that arrived too late to feel honest. Someone even stepped aside as Vera passed. Vera leaned toward Marco and whispered, Amazing. Respect must be included in your tax bracket. Marco nearly laughed, but caught himself when he saw her expression. She was joking, but there was truth inside it. He said quietly, I'm sorry. For what? For how this room treated you. Vera stopped near the window. You didn't do it? No, but I belong to this world. Sometimes that comes with responsibility. She appreciated the answer more than she wanted to show. As the evening began winding down, guests started collecting coats, finishing drinks, and saying careful goodbyes. Vera checked the time and reached for her purse. Marco noticed. Leaving for real this time? Yes, she said. And before you ask, no, it's not because I'm offended. It's because I have a life outside this room. I believe that... Good. He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. Can I see you again? Vera looked at him. The question was simple, but it carried weight. A few hours ago, she had been ready to leave without anyone remembering her name. Now the man who had changed the whole night was asking for more than a polite goodbye. Her first instinct was caution. Marco? I know, he said gently. You don't have to answer quickly. That's not the issue. What is? I've learned to be careful when men with easy lives show interest in WEN with complicated ones. Marco accepted that without flinching. That is fair. Vera searched his face. You're not offended? No. Your caution makes sense. That answer quieted her again. Most men wanted access before trust. Marco seemed willing to wait outside the door until trust opened it. He continued, I'm not asking to step into your life like I own a place there. I'm asking for one chance to know you better. Vera folded her arms. And what does that chance look like? Coffee, in public, simple, no pressure. She narrowed her eyes. Not one of those places where the cup costs more than a grocery item. Marco smiled. Your choice. That is dangerous. I might choose somewhere with plastic chairs. I can sit in plastic chairs. Can you? I'm willing to learn. Vera laughed softly. There it was again. That ease she had not expected. Still, she did not want to be swept up by one kind evening. A dance, a defense, a few honest words. Those were meaningful, but real character was proven after the music stopped. She looked down briefly, then back at him. One coffee, she said. Marco's smile was calm but genuine. One coffee, and no speeches, no showing up with gifts. No gifts, no treating me like a sad story. His expression turned serious. Never. That single word carried enough respect to make Vera believe him. At least for now. She nodded. Then we can meet. The party had nearly emptied when they walked toward the exit together. This time Vera did not feel like she was escaping. She felt like she was choosing. At the doorway, Marco opened the door, but again he stepped aside and let her pass first. Vera paused outside and looked back at him. You know, she said, your 10 minutes became longer than promised. Marco smiled. Should I apologize? No, Vera said, her eyes warm. Just don't let it happen every time. I'll try. She turned toward the night, smiling before she could stop herself. Marco watched her leave, carrying the same quiet smile. Neither of them called it love. Not yet. But both knew the evening had become something neither planned. 3 weeks passed before Vera realized Marco had become part of her normal life in a way she had not planned. It started with coffee. 1 cup became 2. 2 meetings became short phone calls. Short phone calls became messages that made her smile during busy afternoons. Marco never pushed. He never arrived with expensive surprises. He did not speak like a man trying to buy space in her heart. He listened. He remembered small things. He asked about her day without making it feel like an interview. That was why Vera finally invited him to a community cookout in Washington. Marco arrived in a clean shirt, neat shoes, and the careful expression of a man walking into a world where he knew money would not help him understand the rules. Vera saw him from across the outdoor space and laughed before he reached her. Marco stopped. "Why are you laughing already?" "Because you look like you prepared for a business meeting with barbecue smoke." "I wanted to look respectful." "You look nervous." "I am." Vera smiled. "Good. That means you're human." The cookout was lively without trying too hard. People greeted each other warmly, children ran between tables, music played, and everyone seemed to have an opinion about who made the best food. Marco leaned closer to Vera. "Where do I start? With a plate. Which one?" Vera stared at him. "Marco, it's a plate, not a legal contract." He picked one up. Before he could move, someone placed food on it. Then another person added more. Another hand pointed him toward a different table. Marco looked back at Vera helplessly. "Am I supposed to refuse anything?" "Not unless you want to hurt feelings." "I'm running out of plate. That means they like you." He looked down at the food. "This is a test." "It is," Vera said. "And so far you're passing with fear?" Marco laughed, and Vera found herself enjoying his discomfort more than she should have. Not because she wanted him embarrassed, but because he did not act superior. He asked questions. He made mistakes. He laughed at himself. Later, they attended a church program together. Marco stood when others stood, sat when others sat, and once clapped slightly off rhythm until Vera gently touched his wrist. "Follow the people, not your confidence," she whispered. "I thought I was doing well. You were doing brave." He smiled. "I'll accept brave." For Marco, Vera's world felt different from the polished events he knew. People asked direct questions. They teased him kindly. They fed him like he had been hungry for years. Nobody cared what company he owned. Nobody asked what his connections were. They simply watched how he treated Vera. That mattered more than anything. One afternoon after another community gathering, Marco sat beside Vera on a bench while the noise continued around them. "I like this," he said. Vera glanced at him. "The food or the people?" "Both, but mostly how real it feels." She studied him. "In my world, people may ask your business too quickly, but they usually know when your smile is tired." Marco nodded. "In mine, people can sit beside you for years and still never ask if you're okay." Vera's expression softened. That was the thing about Marco. He came from a world that had almost everything, yet sometimes he sounded like a man who had been missing something simple. Before we continue, if this story is touching your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who believes in real love, and comment where you're watching from. Your support helps Love, Money, and Secret bring more meaningful stories to viewers everywhere. As evening settled, Marco walked Vera toward her car. "You survived," she said. "Barely. You ate 3 plates. I was being polite. You were being greedy with manners." Marco laughed. "Then I'll improve next time." Vera paused beside her car. "Next time?" His smile softened. "Only if I'm invited." She looked at him for a quiet moment. The attraction between them was no longer hiding behind jokes. It was there, gentle but clear. Finally, Vera smiled. "We'll see." Marco nodded, accepting the small opening like it mattered. And Vera drove home, knowing this was no longer just coffee, no longer just kindness, and no longer just one strange night at a party. Something real was growing. A few days after the community cookout, Marco called Vera while she was finishing a long day. "I have a question," he said. "That sounds dangerous." "It depends on your answer." Vera smiled as she adjusted the phone against her ear. "Go ahead, there's a charity dinner this weekend." The smile immediately faded. "Marco, you haven't even heard the rest. I know where this is going." Marco laughed softly. "You're impossible." "No, I'm experienced." "That sounds worse." "It should." Marco paused before continuing. "I'd like you to come with me." There it was, exactly where she thought the conversation was heading. Vera sat down slowly. A room full of wealthy strangers? Some are wealthy strangers. Wonderful. Some are normal people. That doesn't help. Marco chuckled. "Vera, it's just dinner. People like you always say that. Then I show up and suddenly everybody is speaking in complete paragraphs and judging each other with smiles. I promise nobody will grade your performance." "Easy for you to say." Marco let her talk. That was one of the reasons she trusted him. He never rushed her concerns. Finally he said, "Come for 1 hour." 1 hour! 1 hour! If you hate it, I'll personally drive you home. You really like making deals. Only with difficult women. Careful. Sorry. Independent women, that's better. By the end of the conversation, Vera agreed. Not because she was comfortable, because Marco had earned enough trust for her to take a chance. The evening arrived faster than she expected. The charity dinner was held in one of Washington's most elegant venues. Everything looked polished. The guests moved with quiet confidence. Conversations flowed smoothly around expensive tables. For a brief moment, Vera remembered the party where she first met Marco. The memory tried to bring back old doubts. But this time was different. She was different. When Marco greeted her at the entrance, he immediately noticed the change. "You look nervous," Vera exhaled. "I am nervous." "Good." She frowned. "Good?" "Yes, it means you care. That makes absolutely no sense." "It does in my head. That's concerning—" Marco laughed. The tension eased immediately. As they entered together, several people greeted Marco. Unlike the first party, Vera didn't retreat into silence. She shook hands. She smiled. She introduced herself naturally. She didn't try to impress anyone. And strangely enough, that confidence impressed people anyway. Marco watched her carefully. Not because he was worried she would fail, because he admired how she carried herself. Vera wasn't pretending to belong. She simply belonged wherever she chose to stand. As the evening continued, some guests welcomed her warmly. Others were more reserved. Vera noticed both. Years of experience had taught her how to read people quickly. One woman smiled while speaking to Marco but barely acknowledged Vera. Another guest asked Vera questions that felt less like conversation and more like investigation. Vera answered politely, then changed the subject. Marco saw every interaction. He didn't interrupt. He didn't embarrass anyone, but he paid attention. At one point during dinner, Vera leaned toward him. "I think your world has professional judges." Marco smiled. "What happened now?" "3 people have looked at me like they're reviewing an application. You're handling it well. I learned from the best." Marco looked surprised. "The best? You? Me? You sat in a room full of people and acted like a normal person." Marco laughed. "I don't know if that's a compliment." "It is." Their conversation flowed easily, the same way it always seemed to. Hours passed without effort. That was what caught Marco off guard. He had spent years attending events, dinners, meetings, and social gatherings, yet very few people made him forget the clock. Vera did. She challenged him. She made him laugh. She made ordinary moments feel important. More than once that evening, he found himself watching her when she wasn't looking, watching the way she listened, watching the way she stayed kind without becoming a people-pleaser, watching the way she remained herself no matter who entered the room. And for the first time, a truth settled quietly into his heart. This wasn't friendship anymore, at least not for him. Somewhere between the coffee meetings, the cookout, the church gathering, and conversations that never felt forced, his feelings had changed. He cared about her more deeply than he intended. The realization didn't scare him. It surprised him. Because he hadn't been looking for love, yet every path seemed to lead back to Vera. Later that evening, as they stepped outside after the dinner ended, Vera looked up at him. "You survived another event?" Marco smiled. "So did you. Barely. You were amazing." Vera rolled her eyes. "That's because you weren't paying attention." Marco looked at her carefully. "No," he said softly. "I was paying very close attention." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them felt different now, warmer, more meaningful. And although Vera didn't fully realize it yet, Marco knew one thing with complete certainty. He was no longer simply enjoying her company. He was falling in love with her. By the time Vera and Marco's connection became public, the warmth between them had grown too visible to hide. They were no longer just 2 people who had shared coffee after a party. They had been seen at community gatherings, charity dinners, church programs, and small public events around Washington. Marco never announced anything, and Vera never tried to draw attention, but people noticed the way he looked at her. That was when the talking started. At first, Vera ignored it. She had lived long enough to know that people could create a whole story from one photograph, one smile, or one moment they did not understand. But the comments became harder to avoid. Some people said Marco was only fascinated because Vera was different from the women in his circle. Others said Vera was enjoying the attention too much. The cruelest ones said she knew exactly what she was doing because Marco had money. Vera heard one comment outside a formal event when 2 people thought she had already walked away. "She seems nice," one voice said. "But let's be honest, women don't just fall for billionaires by accident." Vera stopped behind a tall plant near the hallway. Her fingers tightened around her purse. Another voice answered, "Marco should be careful. A man like him needs someone who fits his world." Vera did not turn around. She did not confront them. She simply walked out with her face calm and her heart heavy. That night, when Marco called, she let the phone ring twice before answering. "Are you home?" he asked. "Yes, you left quickly. I was tired." He paused. Is that all? Vera looked across her quiet living room and swallowed the truth. For tonight, yes. Marco knew her well enough to hear what she did not say, but he did not force the door open. All right, he said gently. Get some rest. I will. After the call ended, Vera sat in silence. The pain was not only the rumors. She had survived rumors before. What hurt was the fear that loving Marco might mean spending every day proving she was not a gold digger, not an outsider, not a mistake, not a woman who had wandered into a life too big for her. The next week, she became quieter. When Marco sent messages, she replied, but not with her usual humor. When he asked to see her, she said she had things to handle. When they finally met for coffee, she smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. Marco noticed everything. You're far away today, he said. Vera stirred her coffee, though she had not added sugar. I'm right here. Your body is... She looked up. Marco, I'm not accusing you. I'm asking where you went. Vera breathed out slowly. Maybe I'm just thinking... About us? She did not answer quickly. That silence told him enough. Marco leaned forward. Talk to me. Vera looked around the cafe, then back at him. Do you know what people are saying? His jaw tightened. Some of it. Then you know this isn't simple. I never thought it was simple, but it's easier for you, she said, her voice low. When people talk, they blame me, not you. They say I'm chasing money. They say I don't fit. They say you should choose someone more suitable. Marco's face showed hurt, but Vera was not finished. I have spent my whole life standing straight while people guessed wrong about me. I'm tired, Marco. I don't want love to become another place where I have to defend my character. He reached for her hand, but she gently pulled back. The movement wounded him more than any raised voice could have. I care about you, Vera said, softer now. That is the problem. Why is that a problem? Because if this keeps growing, people will keep using me to question you, and I don't want to become the reason your world starts laughing behind your back. Marco shook his head. You are not responsible for their small thinking. I know that in my head, but not in your heart? Vera looked away. For the first time since the night they met, silence sat between them like distance. Marco wanted to say more, but Vera stood. I should go. Vera, don't leave like this. I'm not leaving angry. That doesn't make it better. She gave him a sad smile. I just need space to think. This time, when Vera walked away, Marco did not follow immediately. He watched her go, knowing something precious had shifted. And Vera stepped outside, wondering if walking away early would hurt less than staying until love became too painful to protect. 3 days passed. For Vera, they felt longer. She stayed busy on purpose. Work, errands, responsibilities, anything that kept her moving. Because every time she slowed down, her thoughts returned to the same place. Marco. She hated that she missed him. Not because missing someone was wrong, because she had spent years teaching herself not to depend on anyone. Now she found herself looking at her phone more often than usual, wondering if he had called, wondering if he was upset, wondering if she had made the right decision by creating distance. Meanwhile, Marco respected the space she asked for. That did not mean he liked it. He thought about calling several times, thought about showing up, thought about fixing everything with one perfect conversation. But he knew Vera well enough to understand something important. Trust cannot be forced. So he waited. On the 4th evening, Vera sat alone on a bench near a quiet community park in Washington. The sun was beginning to lower. The air was calm. For once, nobody needed anything from her. No deadlines, no obligations, just silence. She heard footsteps. Without looking up, she already knew who it was. Marco stopped a few feet away. I wasn't sure you'd still come here. Vera managed a small smile. I wasn't sure either. He sat beside her, not too close, not too far. The distance felt respectful. For a moment, neither spoke, neither rushed, neither tried to win the conversation before it started. Finally, Marco broke the silence. I miss talking to you. Vera looked down at her hands. I know. You know? I miss talking to you too. The honesty surprised both of them. Marco exhaled slowly. Then why are we sitting on opposite sides of a problem instead of the same side? Vera laughed softly. That sounded rehearsed. It wasn't. It sounded rehearsed. I've had 3 days to think. That earned the first genuine smile he had seen from her in days. But the smile faded quickly. Vera's expression grew serious. Marco, do you know what the hardest part is? Tell me. She stared ahead. It's being judged by people who don't know me. Marco listened. Not interrupting, not preparing a response, just listening. Vera continued. They see me for 5 minutes and decide they know my heart. Marco nodded. I know. They think because you're wealthy there must be an agenda. There must be a hidden reason. You don't owe them explanations. I know that too. Then why carry it? Vera laughed sadly. Because I'm human. That answer hit him harder than anything else. Vera turned toward him. You grew up in a different world, Marco. Maybe? No, definitely. He waited. She continued. When people look at you, they see success first. Marco's expression softened. When people look at me, I spend half my life hoping they'll see beyond assumptions. The words sat heavily between them. Vera took a deep breath. I'm tired. Tired of me? Her head snapped toward him. No. The answer came too quickly, too honestly. Marco noticed. Vera shook her head. I'm tired of defending myself. There it was. The truth. Raw, simple, painful. She looked away again. I'm tired of proving I'm not after money. I'm tired of proving I'm capable. I'm tired of proving I belong in rooms. I'm tired of proving my intentions. Her voice cracked slightly. Sometimes I think if I walk away now, maybe I can avoid spending years defending something beautiful. Marco sat quietly. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower. Can I tell you something? Vera nodded. I'm scared too. That got her attention. She looked at him fully. You're scared? Yes. Of what? Losing you. The answer came without hesitation, without performance, without strategy, just truth. Marco smiled faintly. I know people assume money solves everything. It doesn't. No. He shook his head. It buys comfort. It buys options. It buys privacy. But it doesn't stop fear. Vera listened carefully. Marco continued. When you started pulling away, I realized something. What? I care about you more than I planned to. The honesty left no room to hide. Neither of them looked away. For a long moment, the world around them seemed quieter. Finally, Vera spoke. We're both a mess. Marco laughed. A little. A lot. Fair. They sat there smiling for the first time in days, not because every problem disappeared, not because the critics vanished, not because life suddenly became easy, but because they were finally being honest. Marco looked at her. I'm not asking you to fight the whole world. Good. I'm asking you to trust me. Vera thought carefully, not emotionally, not impulsively, carefully. Then she nodded. And I'm asking you to be patient when old fears show up. I can do that. No grand promises. No grand promises. No dramatic speeches. I've already used my yearly supply. Vera laughed. A real laugh. The kind he had missed. Marco smiled. There she is. Vera shook her head. Don't get used to it. Too late. For the first time since the tension began, the distance between them disappeared. Not because they solved everything. Because they chose honesty over fear, trust over assumptions, and each other over the opinions of strangers. As they stood to leave the park together, neither of them knew exactly what the future would look like. But they knew one thing, they would face it side by side. The community event in Washington came at the right time. It was not as polished as the charity dinner, and it was not as uncomfortable as the party where Vera first met Marco. It felt closer to the kind of place where real people gathered with real concerns, real laughter, and real stories. Marco had been invited to speak. At first, Vera planned to sit quietly near the back. Marco noticed immediately. You're hiding again, he said softly. Vera looked at him. I'm not hiding. I'm selecting a peaceful seat. That sounds like hiding with better grammar. She gave him a look. You've become too comfortable. With you? Yes. Vera tried not to smile, but she failed. He leaned closer. Sit where you want. Not where fear tells you to sit. That stayed with her. So Vera chose a seat closer to the front, not for attention, not to prove anything, simply because she was tired of shrinking in rooms where she had done nothing wrong. As the event began, Vera noticed familiar faces. Some were people from Marco's world who had once watched her with doubt. Some had whispered. Some had smiled politely while measuring her. Others were from her own community, people who knew her strength long before Marco ever did. The difference now was that Vera did not lower her eyes. She sat with calm dignity. Marco walked to the front when his name was called. Many expected him to speak about money, leadership, business, or success. He stood behind the microphone, looked across the room, and remained silent for a few seconds. Then he said, I was asked to speak today about success, but I think we talk about success too often without talking about character. The room grew attentive. Marco continued, Some people walk into rooms and get noticed immediately because of their name, their clothes, or their money. Others walk in quietly, carrying responsibilities nobody can see. They smile while tired. They show up while hurting. They keep going because someone depends on them. Vera's throat tightened. She knew he was speaking generally, but every word felt close. Marco looked briefly in her direction, then back at the audience. Single parents know this kind of strength. They know what it means to be exhausted and still loving, worried and still present, judged and still graceful. The room became still. Some of the people who had judged Vera shifted in their seats. Marco's voice stayed calm. I met a woman who reminded me that dignity does not need permission. She did not ask for attention. She did not chase status. She simply carried herself with honesty in a room that failed to appreciate her. Vera looked down, overwhelmed. Marco did not make her a charity story. He did not paint himself as a rescuer. He honored her as a woman with strength before he ever entered her life. That woman changed how I see people, he said. She reminded me that the quietest person in the room may be carrying the deepest courage. Vera lifted her eyes. Marco looked at her now. Vera, thank you for showing me that real strength does not always raise its voice. For a moment, nobody moved. Then applause began. Soft at first, then stronger. Vera stood slowly, not because she wanted applause, but because she understood what the moment meant. The people who once questioned her had no cruel comment left. The same mouths that whispered now stayed closed. Justice did not arrive through shouting. It arrived through truth. Marco stepped down from the front and returned to Vera. You didn't have to do that, she said quietly. I know. Then why did you? Because respect should be spoken where disrespect once felt comfortable. Vera looked at him, her eyes warm. For the first time, she fully believed that Marco was not asking her to fit into his world. He was willing to make his world better because she was in it. Several months later, Vera found herself standing in front of a mirror preparing for another elegant party. The difference was that she was smiling. The last time she attended an event like this, she had spent half the evening wondering whether she belonged there. Now she was deciding whether Marco's tie looked better before or after he tried fixing it himself. Stop moving, Vera said. Marco stood still. For someone who runs companies, you're surprisingly helpless with a tie. I have strengths. Apparently not this one. Marco smiled as Vera adjusted it. You've become very confident. Vera stepped back to examine her work. I've always been confident. Marco raised an eyebrow. Confident enough to walk into a room and own your space. Vera laughed. That took practice. It looks natural now. His words stayed with her as they traveled to the event. When they arrived, the building looked impressive. Soft lighting, beautiful decorations, groups of guests enjoying conversations. Months earlier, that sight would have tightened something inside her. Not anymore. Vera walked through the entrance beside Marco without hesitation. She greeted people comfortably. She smiled naturally. She did not search for the nearest exit. She did not reach for her phone as protection. Most importantly, she did not question her right to be there. Several guests approached them throughout the evening. Some remembered Vera from previous events. Others had heard about her through community work and charitable projects she had quietly supported alongside Marco. What surprised Vera most was how normal everything felt. Nobody was measuring her. Nobody was deciding whether she belonged. Nobody was waiting for her to fail. She had spent so much time worrying about judgment that she almost forgot something important. Most people eventually follow the example set by character. When someone remains genuine long enough, the truth becomes difficult to ignore. Later in the evening, Vera found herself standing near a large window overlooking the city. The view was beautiful. The atmosphere was calm. For a few minutes, she simply enjoyed the moment. Marco joined her carrying 2 glasses of sparkling water. Thought you might be thirsty. Vera accepted one. Thank you. They stood quietly together. Comfortable silence had become one of their favorite things. Not every meaningful moment required conversation. Sometimes simply standing beside the right person was enough. Marco looked around the room. Then he smiled. Vera noticed immediately. What? You know what I just realized. What? This room looks familiar. Vera followed his gaze. Slowly, she understood. Another elegant event. Another gathering of successful people. Another evening surrounded by conversations and laughter. It wasn't the same building, but it felt similar to the night they met. The memory made her smile. Marco shook his head. I still remember finding you near the door. Vera laughed. I remember planning my escape. You were very determined, because I thought staying would make the evening worse. Marco looked at her. And now? Vera glanced around the room, not nervously, not cautiously, comfortably. She saw people she respected, people who respected her. She saw a life she had built honestly. She saw a future that no longer felt frightening. Most of all, she saw Marco standing beside her. The same man who had offered a chair instead of pity. The same man who listened before speaking. The same man who chose respect every time he had the opportunity to choose convenience. Marco leaned slightly closer. Still thinking about escaping? Vera smiled. The answer came easily. No. She paused, then added the words that perfectly completed their journey. This time I saved my seat. Marco laughed softly. Not because the answer was funny, because it was true. Months earlier, Vera had been ready to leave a room that made her feel invisible. Now she understood something important. The goal was never to earn a place through other people's approval. The goal was to recognize her own value regardless of who noticed it. Marco reached for her hand. She gladly placed hers in his. No hesitation, no fear, no doubt, just trust, the kind of trust built through patience, honesty, and time. As the evening continued around them, Vera rested her head lightly against his shoulder. For once, neither of them felt alone. Two single parents, two people who had carried responsibilities quietly, two people who discovered that love grows strongest when it begins with respect. Before we close today's story, if you enjoyed this journey, please like this video, subscribe to Love, Money, and Secret, and share it with someone who believes that character matters more than status. Also, tell us where you're watching from in the comments. We love hearing from our family around the world, and remember this lesson: never judge someone by how quietly they stand in a room. Sometimes the strongest person is the one nobody notices at first. Real love is built on dignity, respect, patience, understanding, and character, not wealth, status, or appearances. As the music continued and the evening carried on around them, Vera and Marco remained exactly where they wanted to be, together,